And we're going to move on to our second subject matter now. Well, it's the 7th anniversary of 9/11, the day those trade centers went down. And there you have it up on your screen as a reminder. But now we're existing in post 9/11, the day I can say the world changed. Now, did it change for the better? Meaning, all of the changes that we've seen implemented worldwide, security and so on, was it needed? Was it really a change in era where we had to stand up and take note? For instance, the airport security, some of you are saying that it's too tight. Others are saying, well, it's absolutely needed because the last thing we want is a repeat of 9/11. And on the other hand, we also have in Canada the Anti-Terror Act that took effect. Some say it's a violation of human rights, but yet nothing has really made the headlines in terms of people's violations of human rights under this Anti-Terror Act, unless you want to bring up something that the public should know about. How do you feel about it? Do you think we've become a paranoid country? 9/11 is something nobody wanted to see, but how do you feel about the world today? Do you think Canada is paranoid? Let us know, and I'm going to start with you on this one, Al. What do you think?
Absolutely, I feel we're paranoid.
Too paranoid, Al?
Too paranoid, I think. We've adopted this fear culture out of the States, and it's a big concern of mine. And let's face it, we can put in all the security measures we want, but it's not going to stop terrorism. Terrorism is as old, if not older, than conventional war. If we concentrate just on the domestic flight security situation, and we look at what measures we're doing and what is the likeliness of that happening again with commercial airliners, which I think, you know, we've pretty well limited any chance of that happening again with our security measures at a huge cost. However, you know, there's...
Was it worth it though? Was it worth it?
I don't... I think what is not worth it, excuse me, is the fact that now we're being screened by multinational governments, and I mean the freedom of information, personal information, is a big concern of mine, and who's got that information and what's being used with it. And let's face it, I mean, it still isn't difficult for somebody to get in a private aircraft and fly it into a building, and how do you stop that? So, I mean, it's a difficult thing to try to measure, and it's one of those situations that governments can exploit and develop further into a police state, and that's always a big concern of mine.
Paul, how do you feel about this one?
Well, yeah, I mean, there can be... crisis is what governments can use, and it's the only thing they can use to get people willing to violate their own freedom. So historically, we just keep doing it. I mean, think about the October crisis. That was, what a change. October crisis in 1970. Following that, the Mulroney government came in and said, we've got to have a different kind of war measures, a different kind of martial law, something that times out. There was fear that Canada's government was getting too powerful. Now we fear, you know, Canada's government isn't powerful enough. And we start doing things like imposing these not even search, but just seizure laws. Seizure of things from people who haven't even been charged with a crime yet. Because they might one day use them as a crime. They'll take their computers, their cars, and all they have to prove is that they might, on a balance of probabilities, might use these in a crime. Absolutely insane. We've had these laws in Ontario since 2001, and I think that they need to be eliminated. But seizure is a little bit different. Grabbing people's property for no good reason is different than being cautious, you know, getting on a plane. I think, you know, going through...
The need's there.
Yeah, if you're going through, you know, the check-in, you know, you're passing through the X-ray machine or whatever, I have no problem with that. If I'm carrying something I shouldn't be carrying on a plane, like a gun, I draw the line at things like nail clippers and hairpins, bobby pins. But I mean, you know, knives and guns, yeah, you know, there are people who try to bring them on. They ought not to be there, and we need to screen. Yep.
Okay, let's go now to Gail on line 4. Hi, Gail. You're on the line. Go ahead, Gail. Now we're going to go for a break now, but before we do, we're asking you the question. Of course, we're in a world that forever changed, 9/11. Today's the anniversary, the 7th. Do you think that we've gone overboard in Canada in our efforts to protect ourselves? For instance, the Anti-Terror Act, and not only that, but extra security, the way we have it in the airports. Do you think it's necessary? We're going to go for a break. We'll return after this. Stay tuned. Hello again, and welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. We're continuing to ask you the question, in the post-9/11 climate, do you think that Canada is paranoid? Or do you agree with the measures that we've taken in terms of airport security and in terms of the Anti-Terror Act? How do you feel about it? Call us and let us know how you feel. In fact, right now we have a very interesting player on the phone line, Julian Fantino, OPP Commissioner, and he's also former Commissioner of Emergency Management for the City of Toronto. Julian Fantino, are you there?
I'm here, thank you. And actually, it was emergency management for the province of Ontario.
For the province of Ontario, yes.
Yes.
And Julian, we're asking the public the question, and of course our guest today, whether Canada has been paranoid since 9/11 took place. We'd like to know how you feel about this particular question to start.
Well, there's absolutely no paranoia involved. This is a new reality, if you will, that we are in fact vulnerable. We are a very target-rich society, environment, if you will. And we need to be very conscientious and concerned about terrorism. Is about making a statement. That statement can be made just about anywhere. So, no, there's no paranoia here. It's just a reality that we have to accept.
Can you give us a little bit of insight as to incidents, perhaps, not necessarily specific, that have taken place that will cause you to say that we're not being paranoid and that we do need to be on some heightened alert here in Canada?
Well, you know, without giving away any trade secrets, it's no surprise to any of us that for all of our efforts to frustrate the activities of terrorists or those who want to engage in that activity, we too need to be very conscientious about the fact that Canada has been mentioned in terrorist kind of language. We also know that there is sympathetic individuals and organizations within Canada that have terrorist kinds of backgrounds. You know about some of the different entities that have been basically made illegal by the Canadian government as being sympathetic or otherwise supporting terrorism. So, you know, the globalization of terrorism now is certainly something that Canada needs to be very vigilant, very concerned and conscientious about. And we've had investigations here that have had international ties, if you will, to terrorist groups and so forth. So there's no escape from the fact that the globalization of travel and technology and communications have also brought a dimension of threat to Canadian society from the terrorist threat.
Now, there are those who believe, and they purport, that if terrorists are really out to get you, they're going to get you anyway. How do you meet that?
Well, you do everything that you can to frustrate the efforts. A lot of it has to be in the area of intelligence gathering and networking with the national security agencies, law enforcement agencies across the world, and that's certainly one thing that's improved significantly, not only in Canada but worldwide. I can tell you that there's a lot of work being done to frustrate the efforts of wannabe terrorists or those who are intent on carrying out terrorist attacks on not only Canadian society but the free democratic world. So you just have to work at it. And I suppose one of the issues that comes up is what exactly can you quantify? And I don't know what you can do about that, in that we really don't know in a lot of cases what we have prevented or what we have been able to frustrate, but we know we have.
Now, these efforts have been collaborative, and I know that as Commissioner of the OPP, there is a department, if you can explain us about it, an anti-terrorism section of the OPP. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, we, like every other major law enforcement agency and national security agency, have had to focus on this area. I mean, for the longest time, we have been very diligent and working hard on organized crime and those kinds of issues. But with this new threat, if you will, and certainly manifested in the most horrible way 7 years ago today, we had to look at the bigger picture, that Canada is a free and democratic society that would be and has been, I think, the focus of terrorist groups. And And so our unit, the anti-terrorism unit of the Ontario Provincial Police, works very diligently and very cooperatively with the whole of the international law enforcement community and national security community to safeguard our interests, our citizens, and our communities in this country, and our citizens beyond.
Yes, now, one final question. As former top cop for Toronto and now OPP commissioner, I'd like to know what your response is to a Calgary professor who, his advice was, we need to expand these anti-terror laws to include those members of gangs, that, in effect, gangsters are basically city terrorists. How do you feel about this?
Well, yeah, I understand what the intent is. I understand that gangs can, in fact, terrorize communities as they do. We see an awful lot of that. But I think we have to draw a distinction between international terrorist groups and those domestic, basically criminal elements that certainly are a big challenge and a big concern to us. So I would like to think that we can deal with both of those issues with the appropriate legislation, the proper tools, and the resources that are so critical today in dealing with these issues, either at the local level or internationally.
OPP Commissioner Julian Fantino, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure, and take care.
And we're going to go for a break now. When we come back, we're going to continue to ask you the question, do you think that Canada is being over-vigilant? You've heard OPP Commissioner Julian Fantino. How do you feel about it? We're going to return after this. Stay tuned. Hello again, and welcome back to Viewpoints on the Line. Well, you heard the viewpoint of OPP Commissioner Julian Fantino in this post-9/11 climate, asking you the question, do you think, as Canadians, we're too vigilant, or do you think we're doing the right thing? Let's go now to Ted on line 4. Hi, Ted. What do you think?
Good afternoon, Christine.
Good afternoon.
Yes, I believe we do live in a climate of fear. It seeps over from the United States, and to listen to the commissioner of the OPP saying, well, you know, we can't quantify it, and we can't tell you about these terrible things that are going to happen, but we know we've prevented them. In risk assessment, you evaluate your risk, and you take reasonable steps. And I don't consider arresting people and not giving them access to the information that led to their arrest so that they can defend themselves. That's not a reasonable step. It really threatens our democracy.
Ted, thanks for calling in. And I agree on that notion that, Al, you brought forth, and you did too, Paul, that such incidents could lead to a violation. But let's be fair, since 9/11, and that's a long time, 7 years, we really have not been seeing any front page news about people's rights getting violated left, right, and center due to the Anti-Terror Act. And that, to me, speaks for itself. I think that proves to be a clean record there, because trust me, there are publications that would put that front page right front and center if such violations were even remotely taking place. But thanks for your concern, because one thing I have to tell the two of you, and I'd like to hear your response, is when you're being threatened repeatedly, and Al-Qaeda did issue another threat recently, before 9/11, if that threat became public, that, hey, those towers are going to go down, you would have probably heard the same thing, we're being paranoid, it's not going to happen. When we saw those towers come down, it was a shock to everyone. It became surreal. Most people, if you ask them, what were you doing that day when you saw those towers came down, they could tell you. Yep. They could tell you, because it's something that was freeze-framed in your mind. You would never imagine that something such as that could take place. When you look at the rest of the world on what's happening, most terrorist attacks are actually Muslims against other Muslims. You've got the fight between the Sunnis, the Shiites. It's a really real war going on there. And given the threat, given our democracy, do you really think that we're being too paranoid? I mean, I'm not comfortable either with the approach of sitting back, waiting for what we see abroad to come here. I'd like to hear your feedback on this. I'm not sure we're aware as Canadians.
Sure.
We don't have that atmosphere.
I think a lot of people don't go around thinking about, there's a Muslim terrorist that's sleeping under my bed. I don't think they worry about
No, and we don't want to
like
do that. We don't want to do that.
So I don't think paranoia has gone to that level.
In this country.
Not in this country.
No.
And I think that's a good thing, that it hasn't gotten to that level.
Because then they win.
Right. But I think that there is not enough concern about different things. For example, we don't take much concern about the threat of theocracy. We don't take in this country, nearly as much as in the U.S., the idea that religious commandments in various texts, that kind of thing, should not be the basis for government policy. And if we don't strengthen our commitment to, sort of a more scientific approach to whether or not the law is going to be imposing, the government is going to be using force to stop someone doing, take, for example, global warming. Global warming should be based upon science, demonstrable evidence, not upon someone thinks because they made a model that the whole world's going to melt down.
But then again, you get to the whole point again, and we're going outside of the subject today. What is science from that point of view? Because you've got as many scientists, even though people that believe in the Big Bang Theory will refute that, but go do your Google searches for those scientists who do support creationism, and they'll say, well, it doesn't make sense. Who's ever seen an explosion amount to such a wonderful creation in terms of what we see as order in our society? So even from the point of view of science, there's large disagreement as to what constitutes science in that form, the unknowns.
I agree there's always going to be debate. I'm just saying, you sort of take that that lesson from the Christian Bible and say, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar, render unto God that which is God's, and that way, when we're rendering unto Caesar, what we're doing is we're saying, to live in this world, we govern according to the facts of this world. To live in the afterlife, you govern in accordance with whatever and we don't talk about the government of this earth, we're talking about the government of your own decision making. So if you want to make decisions that you think are consistent with an afterlife, do so, but not by violating the rules of living on this earth.
Do you see that happening here, though?
Yeah, I do. I think that when you start seeing people saying that the basis for government is, well, 50% plus one of us want it to happen, so go out there and start fining people, taxing people, imprisoning people because we want it. As soon as you replace facts and evidence and logic with what people merely want, then you're opening the door to any kind of mysticism or irrationality or UFO conspiracy theories that you want. I mean, you could literally have people say 50% plus one of us believe that a UFO landed in the desert, and therefore we want a law that prohibits living in the desert.
Thoughts there, Al?
Going back to the original question, I've never felt a terrorist threat against myself or my family in this country. I've always felt the best anti-terrorist defense was a foreign policy, and I've always felt we've had a positive one, and we've always played a role as a peacekeeper that didn't attract negative attention. What I do see as a terrorist threat is when a guy like Fantino can bug my phone without a search warrant. To me, that's the biggest threat that we should all be concerned with, and these are and this is a policy that he's pushing and pushing and pushing, and for more control. What I want to know is how much has Fantino's budgets increased as a result of this whole war on terror, and I'm paying for it.
Al, I hear you, and I know that there are those who agree with you, but I'll tell you, those people that went into that building on 9/11, if you were to ask, unfortunately they're dead, they're gone. Now, if we were to ask them, did you feel the threat before you went into that building? They would answer no, because they wouldn't have gone. We don't always feel the threat. And I'm just being fair here, because there are two sides of this.
I can appreciate that.
We don't always feel that threat.
I can appreciate that, but if let's get down to basics. We weren't attacked. The Americans were attacked.
But we're threatened. We're repeatedly threatened.
Well, who's threatening us, and who's the official guy that's threatening us? I mean, the way the world works behind us.
We've got terrorism going on here. The Qatar family.
Who's Al-Qaeda?
The Qatar family is an example. These people have been, the father, in and out of jail in Pakistan, in various places abroad. It's been proven. We know that terrorist cells do exist within our country.
Okay.
And from the point of view of that, how do we respond to that?
Well, I mean, I'm always concerned about who's threatening who and who they really are. I mean, Al-Qaeda isn't a part of the UN. We don't know who Al-Qaeda is. We do know that there are cells that have a special interest in promoting this anti-war.
And they've been found in the hills of Afghanistan.
Absolutely. And
Pakistan.
I mean, you just don't know who's threatening who and the real root of their origins. So, I mean, that's always a big concern of me.
And then again, look what happened in Britain. You see, these things are turning up. We're going to go for a break. We'll be back after this. Stay tuned.